Hey everybody, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode 3 of my podcast. Welcome again. And in case you are listening or watching for the first time, welcome too. I created this podcast and channel with the intent of helping intermediate and advanced learners of English polish their skills, become better communicators, communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and of course, more awareness. So if you're new here, welcome to the show, welcome to the channel, and subscribe, follow the show so you don't miss a single new episode. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just hit the button that says follow, and then you're going to be notified every time I upload a new episode here on the podcast. Every week, there's a new episode. And if you are here on YouTube, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, click on that little bell icon so that every time I upload a video, you are notified and you don't miss a single new video. So in this episode today, I want to talk to you guys all about proficiency exams, proficiency tests in English. This episode is a follow-up to the second episode I posted last week about the CEFR levels. In that episode, I give a general description of each level on the CEFR and how to understand the levels. Now, as a follow-up, in this episode, I want to talk to you a little bit here about proficiency exams, because proficiency exams are the tools to help you determine which level on the CEFR you fall into. All right. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the 4 most popular proficiency tests out there. And I'm going to be giving you also some of my personal opinion, because I have helped students prepare for all these tests that I'm going to be talking about today. And I have experience with all of them. And I also have my personal favorite. So I'm going to also try to bring my experience as a teacher and also my personal experience as a learner when it comes to deciding which proficiency test should you take, okay? Before I delve into the proficiency exams here, each one of them, by the way, let me tell you which ones I'm going to be talking about so you know, yeah? I'm going to be talking about TOEIC first, and then TOEFL, and then we move on to IELTS, and finally the Cambridge exams, okay? So we're going to be talking about these 4 today: TOEIC, TOEFL, IELTS, and Cambridge. There are more out there, but these are the most popular ones, I would say, okay? Before we start talking about each one of them, I think it's worth answering the question, why should I take a proficiency exam? Why should you take a proficiency test? Well, I listed here, guys, I have it on my phone. I listed here 4 reasons why I consider important for you eventually in your journey to consider taking a proficiency test, all right? Reason number 1, it gives you a way to measure your progress. Think about it. How can you measure something? How can you see progress in something if you don't have any numbers, any analytics to go by? You know, how can you measure your progress if you have no way of measuring it? By taking a proficiency exam, this is a very useful way, actually, for you to see where you are in terms of level and where you can get to, or where you want to go. So it's an excellent way for you to measure your progress. If you don't have a clear goal, how can you get to that goal? So the proficiency exam or test gives you that. Okay, a great way for you to measure your progress. Reason number 2, it gives you a complete assessment of your level when it comes to the 4 skills. As you know, we have 4 main skills when it comes to English learning: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So the proficiency tests, they usually assess your English as a whole. So there is a writing component, there's a speaking component, a reading component, and a listening component, all right? Some of them even have a grammar component, all right? So this is really useful, yeah? Because communicating well in English, guys, is not just about speaking. Remember this, okay? It's not just about speaking. I know everybody wants to speak English, but communicating well, using a foreign language well, is not just about speaking. You have to understand most things you hear, for starters. You have to be able to read anything and understand the meaning of the text. And of course, you have to produce written content. You have to be able to write a letter, write an email, write a report for work, write a presentation, maybe create some slides for you to present at work, or write a thesis for your university paper. All right. So it's not just about speaking. So it's about listening, reading, and writing. And by taking a proficiency test, you will have a very good idea of how your 4 main skills are doing. Okay. The third reason, it shows where your gaps are. This is actually connected to the second reason. It shows where your gaps are, because maybe you have 1 or 2 skills that are really developed, very well developed, but the other 2 skills are not so developed, so you can work on them. For example, maybe your reading and listening skills are really developed. Your listening is good, you understand a lot of things. Your reading is good, you understand a lot of things when you read, but when it's time to speak, you can't speak properly or as naturally. Or if you have to produce something written, write a text, you realize that you don't even know how to spell the words. Like, oh, is this word spelled with a double P, double M? I don't know. And this is funny, guys, because I have met some students like that in the past. They had amazing speaking skills. They spoke really good English, crystal clear pronunciation, very easy to understand them. Their listening skills were also very good, so we could have a conversation, no problem at all. But sometimes I would ask them to write an essay for me or a piece of text, and I would be surprised looking at their text because, there were a lot of mistakes there in terms of punctuation or spelling mistakes. Like the person uses the word well and correctly when the person speaks, but when it's time to write, the person misspells the word. So that's not ideal. Yeah. And you want to develop all your 4 skills. Okay. Proficiency tests also help you identify that. What are my weak areas? What are my gaps? So you can tackle those and improve them. Okay. Reason number 4, it gives you motivation. Yes, guys, because when you have a specific test that you want to take in a certain amount of time, and you study for that test, you practice, you prepare for that test, you sit that exam, and you pass, this is a milestone for you. A milestone is a significant event in your English learning journey. So that gives you motivation to go like, yes, I reached this milestone. And then that motivates you even more to keep going, because human beings are motivated by progress. We need to feel that we are moving forward, that we are progressing. If we don't feel that, it's not a very good place to be, And this is not just about English learning, about everything in life. We need to feel like we are going somewhere. We are making progress. And proficiency tests are great to give you that sense of progress. And finally, reason number 5, it is useful for your resume. If you want to use English for work, it's great if you have a certain proficiency test that is well known, that is credible, from a credible institution, proving your current level of English. Instead of just writing on a resume, intermediate English or advanced English, you actually have a proper certification. It means that you have been tested. Your English has been tested and has gotten that score or that level. This is really good for your resume. All right. So these are some of the reasons why I consider important for you to take a proficiency test eventually. But then you might be asking now, okay, but which one do I take, Thiago? Which proficiency test should I take? Because there are so many options out there. So hopefully today, by the end of this episode, you will have a better understanding of these 4 popular proficiency tests and decide which one is right for you. Okay? So let's start here with the TOEIC exam. I have here an article in front of me. I can link this article later in the show notes and also in the description of the video if you are on YouTube, if you want to check it out and read it also in more detail. I'm going to be reading some segments here and commenting on them. TOEIC. The TOEIC, Test of English for International Communication, is a standardized English test oriented towards professionals and companies. The TOEIC is actually 2 separate tests, one which tests the receptive English skills, reading and listening, and one which tests the productive English skills, speaking and writing. All right? So TOEIC is mostly used for professional settings. If you have to prove your English level for work purposes, for a company, maybe to know which level of English you have, TOEIC is a popular choice in this case. Notice that it's a separate test. You have to take the reading and listening at one moment, and then the speaking and the writing at another moment. It's not all the skills in one sitting, okay? So you actually have to take 2 separate tests if you want to have a full picture of your English level, okay? About the score ranges between 10 points and 990 points, all right? And I have some other useful information here. For example, the TOEIC is a product of ETS, an American nonprofit organization, which also makes the TOEFL, okay? So the same institution that is responsible for TOEFL is also responsible for TOEIC. So TOEIC is an American test, basically, okay? It's run by an American institution, all right? The ETS. Now, why take this test? For professional certification, can be a good option. Again, if you want to prove your English skills for work, all right? The website I have here says that the price ranges between $125 and $200, okay? And the test result is quite quick for you to have. So between 3 and 15 days, you should have the results already once you've done the test, okay? But there is an expiration date. The score is usually valid for only 2 years, okay? So if you take it today, you have 2 years to use this test, these results, okay? Because 2 years later, you might have to take it again. So it expires every 2 years, okay? So that's it about TOEIC. Now, let's move on to TOEFL, all right? Which is run by the same institution, the ETS, all right? Take a look. TOEFL. The TOEFL, Test of English as a Foreign Language, is a standardized academic English test, primarily taken by students applying to universities in the United States, all right? The TOEFL is also accepted as proof of English ability by some universities outside the United States. And I guess the most popular format is the TOEFL IBT. I believe it stands for Internet-Based Test, okay? It's done via a computer, all right? It has 4 sections, so reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And it's a long and rigorous test, 3 hours long, okay? It lasts for 3 hours. Usually, many students spend 3 to 6 months preparing for TOEFL before taking the exam, all right? So we have some key information here. The main difference between TOEIC and TOEFL is that TOEFL is mainly for academic purposes. If you want to go to the US and study there, go to university or college there, TOEFL is the best option. But if you want to go there for work purposes, TOEIC might be enough, all right? About the score, it goes from 0 to 120 points, all right? And why should you take TOEFL? for university application in the US, Australia, New Zealand, UK, or Canada. Keep in mind that TOEFL is more popular in the United States, okay? Some institutions in Canada, Australia, New Zealand might accept TOEFL as well, but it's not as popular as it is in the US, okay? The price here ranges from $100 to $320. And the test result usually comes out between 6 to 10 days. So it's also quite quick for you to get the test results. I think one of the worst feelings is you do the test and then you have to wait a long time to get the test results. You go like, oh man, I just want to know my result. You know, the good news about both TOEIC and TOEFL is that the test results, they come out relatively quickly. Okay. Between 1 week and 2 weeks, you should have them already. But remember, just like TOEIC, it also expires after 2 years. So depending on your plans, you might have to sit the TOEFL test multiple times if you need it for any sort of university application, okay? So the score validity is 2 years, all right? Another nice point here to mention is that both TOEIC and TOEFL, they don't really evaluate your English up to C2 level, okay? They go up to C1 level, meaning that if you score the highest score possible on TOEIC or TOEFL, comparing that or mapping that to the CEFR, you would be a C1 speaker, okay? If you are looking to get to C2, I wouldn't recommend TOEIC nor TOEFL because they don't really go up until C2 in terms of certification, all right? So keep that in mind. It goes up to C1. But now let's talk a little bit about IELTS. The International English Language Testing System, or IELTS, is a standardized English test used primarily by students applying to universities abroad and by prospective immigrants to the UK and other Commonwealth countries, okay? So IELTS is really popular for university. Again, if you want to study abroad, let's say, it says UK here, but other countries that popularly accept IELTS include Canada, Canada, I was going to say England, but you know, England is UK already. Yeah. So Australia, New Zealand. All right. So it's a really popular test. It's important to know that there are two versions of the test, the general English test and the academic English test. These are the most popular versions. Okay. And about the ownership, this is interesting. Who owns IELTS or who manages this test? The IELTS is the product of Cambridge English Language Assessment and is co-managed by Cambridge, the British Council, and IDP IELTS Australia. All right. So it's a little group of, institutions there, a small group of institutions that owns and is responsible for IELTS. Okay. Cambridge being one of them. Now, about the test versions, again, like I just said, we have the IELTS Academic and the IELTS General Training. You usually take the IELTS General Training for immigration purposes. Imagine, for example, you want to immigrate to Canada, so in order to score enough points there, you might need to take the General English Test. Okay? That's the general version from IELTS. The general version usually focuses more on everyday language that you see at work, that you see in your day-to-day routine when you are living abroad. That's kind of the language there. The academic IELTS obviously focuses more on academic purposes, okay? So if you want to maybe go to college, let's say in Canada, academic IELTS is the best way to go, all right? The main difference between them in terms of test is actually in the writing section and the reading section, okay? The writing, when you take the general test, usually you have to write a letter informal or formal, and an essay. If you take the academic test, you have to write a summary, like a graph analysis. They give you some graphs, some data, some table there, and then you have to write a summary of that data. That's the first task, and then an essay right after. And also the reading, okay? The reading passages on the general test usually focus more on day-to-day language. The reading passage on the academic text, or test, you guessed it, focuses more on academic tests or topics, all right? About the scoring here, the score for IELTS goes from, I believe, 0 or 1 all the way to 9, okay? Up to 9. Just for you to have an idea, between 6 and 6.5 on IELTS, that would be considered a B2 level, okay? And then around 7, 7.5, that is considered C1, okay? Now, if you do extremely well on IELTS, and if you get 8, 8.5, or even 9, that's a C2 level. So you see, this is different from TOEIC and TOEFL. With IELTS, you can actually get all the way to C2. If you score between 8 and 9, that would be a proficient user, a C2 level user, okay? Why take it? As it says here, immigration to the UK or to other countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and university application, all right? The price here, it says that is between $200 and $300, and the test result is also really quick for you to receive, between 6 and 13 days, all right? But just like the previous two, it also has a score validity or expiration date of 2 years. So make sure you plan well when you're going to take any of these tests, either TOEIC, TOEFL, or IELTS, because after 2 years, you might need to take them again, all right? So that's it about IELTS, guys. Now let's move on to the last exam here, the Cambridge exams, all right? Let's talk about the Cambridge exams here. And I have to tell you in advance that the Cambridge exams are actually my favorite types of exams, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit why, okay? But first, let's understand the Cambridge exams here. The Cambridge English tests are a suite of English certification exams, each of which delivers a test-specific certificate that is valid indefinitely, okay? So one of the pros of taking the Cambridge exam is that it doesn't expire. It's worth for life, okay? Once you get it, it's yours, okay? Each Cambridge exam tests a specific level of English. So you must first choose which exam is appropriate for your level by taking a placement test. This is another main difference because all the other tests that we have discussed so far, TOEIC, TOEFL, and IELTS, they are great for diagnosis, okay? If you are not sure right now of your current level of English, taking one of these tests would be useful because you don't fail them. You don't fail IELTS, you don't fail TOEFL, you don't fail TOEIC. What is different here is your performance. If you do very well, you get a high score. If you do really badly, you're gonna get a low score. But you don't fail. You just get a high score or a low score. The Cambridge exams, on the other hand, you might fail because each level has a different test. Imagine I want to take the Cambridge B2 exam. If my score is not enough to be considered B2, I'm not going to get the B2 certificate from Cambridge. I might get a document that says that my ability is at B1 or even lower, okay? But not the B2 certificate. So that's also the main difference, okay? You actually fail Cambridge if you don't get enough points to be considered that level. So the levels here, each one of them has a different Cambridge test, okay? So for A2 level, for example, you have a Cambridge test for that level. It's called the CAT, okay? And then for B1 level, you have the PAT, or nowadays I think it's called preliminary, okay? And then for the B2 level, it used to be called FCE, but now I think the name is FIRST, the first certificate. So if you take the Cambridge First Certificate in English, that's B2 level. If you pass that exam, you receive a B2 certificate. And then they also have the advanced exam. In the past, it used to be called CAE, Certificate of Advanced English. Nowadays, I think it's simply called Cambridge Advanced or C1 Advanced. And also the last one, CPE, in the past, Certificate of Proficiency in English. Nowadays, it's called C2 Proficiency. Okay? So the cool thing about the Cambridge exams is that for each individual level, they have a specific exam that you take to see if you are really at that level. So for example, if you are not sure whether you are a B1 or B2 level speaker, you could try, for example, taking the Cambridge B2 first test. And if you pass, good job, you are a B2 speaker. If you don't really pass, you are probably B1. Okay? So this is important to point out here. And about the scoring, they usually go A, B, C. Okay? So if you get an A, you pass. If you get a B, you pass. And if you get a C, you also pass. Okay? The difference is that imagine you take a B2 first exam from Cambridge. Okay? If you score a B, it means that you are, I would say, a solid B2 level. If you score a C, I wouldn't consider it a solid B2. I would consider it a B2 level that maybe might need some work still, but B2, okay? And then if you score an A on the B2 first, that's already C1 level. It's already the low C1 level. It means that you are a low C1. This is also something cool when it comes to interpreting the Cambridge results, okay? And like I said, it doesn't expire. Once you have it, it's yours. About why should you take it, right? I think the Cambridge guys, yes, you can use it for, to apply for universities, but mostly in the UK, all right? And depending on the company or where you're trying to immigrate, you might be able to use it, but mostly, I recommend Cambridge for learning purposes, okay? I think the other exams, TOEIC, TOEFL, and IELTS, they serve a very specific purpose. Immigration, okay, IELTS, for example. University in the US, TOEFL, all right? Immigration in Australia, IELTS. You see, very specific purposes, like life purposes. For English learning, like, if you want to test your English as a learner, just to measure your progress and to keep evolving, the Cambridge exams are great for that because you can take one exam for each level. Imagine you spend a year studying B2 level language with your teacher, for example. At the end of that year, you can take the exam, the B2 first. If you pass, great. You've got to B2. Now, next year, let's focus on C1 language, and then you can try the C1 exam up until C2. So it's a great way for you to structure your studies this way. I didn't take the B2 from Cambridge. I took the C1 in 2008. I think I shared this when I shared my story with you guys. So in 2008, I took the C1 and passed. And in 2017, I took the Cambridge C2, which is the main certificate, the main proficiency certificate I have until today. All right. Now, about the price here, it says between $150 and $250. The test results take a little bit longer, though, okay? Could be between 2 days all the way to 40 days. So it might take you a month or a little over a month for you to actually get the certificate. But remember, it doesn't expire. One final benefit, I think, from the Cambridge exams, guys, is that they also have another component. It's not just speaking, reading, listening, and writing. 4. They have a fifth component, which is called use of English. Use of English is another paper the test has that tests specifically your grammar knowledge and vocabulary use. All right? So I find the Cambridge exam from a learner perspective and even from a teacher perspective much more complete in terms of assessment, okay? You really get a good breakdown of all your skills. And the cool thing also is that you get to learn which skills you need to develop more. Maybe you get the B2 certificate as a whole, okay? Like the global score is B2. But then you realize that your speaking score was higher than your listening score. So that means that you have to work on your listening more. Or your writing score, even though it was B2, it was the lowest score of all the other abilities. So you know that your writing is not that strong, even though your overall level is B2. So you get a much more precise assessment of your English level and also of your blind spots, your gaps, and what you should focus on. All right? Guys, that's pretty much it about the 4 most popular, I would say, proficiency tests in English, okay? There are more out there, and I really recommend you spend some time reading more about these tests to learn more for yourself, okay? I'm going to leave the link to this article that I have here in the show notes and also in the video description. And also I'm going to leave the links to the official websites of the institutions that run these tests. Okay. So the ETS, the Cambridge English Assessment website. Okay. The best place actually for you to get more information from these tests is by going to the official website. So if it is TOEIC or TOEFL, go to the ETS website. If it is IELTS, go to the IELTS website. And if it is Cambridge, go to the Cambridge English website. All right? Guys, before I close this episode, I thought it would be nice to start doing something cool here on the podcast, which is answering one of your questions, okay? Answering a question that you leave on YouTube. I have been receiving a lot of comments on YouTube, and it's great. I mean, it's great to see such an engaged community of people interested in improving their English, commenting there. And I have been doing my best to respond to everybody. I have been reading every comment, okay? But it takes some time to get to everybody. So I'm going to start in every podcast episode answering at least one question, okay, that you guys leave on the comment. So to close this episode today, I'm going to answer this question here from Promit533. And the question is it imperative to make yourself isolated from the mother tongue speakers to obtain a more authentic English environment? I think what you're saying is if you should just focus on English and that's it, right? Like avoid any contact with people who speak your native language, right? Look, I actually did that a little bit, at least in the beginning of my journey. I was pretty obsessed with English. I would say for the first 2-3 years, meaning that I deliberately tried to avoid contact with anything that was in Portuguese. So I didn't watch anything in Portuguese. I didn't read anything in Portuguese. I didn't listen to anything in Portuguese. So, and even people, I mean, I tried not to talk so much in Portuguese, okay? That was in the beginning. I think that it's valid. I think it's valid for you to obsess over English a little bit for a while. And then after that, you can, come back to your mother language. Like nowadays, for example, I don't feel the need anymore to formally study English. Nowadays, I still use English a lot. It's part of my day. It's part of my life, but I don't study deliberately anymore. So actually nowadays I find myself coming back to my mother language more and more. I find myself reading a book in Portuguese now, watching something in Portuguese, speaking more Portuguese with my family, for example, my friends, So I think it's these are steps in the journey, When you are really serious and focused on learning English and improving, I think you should obsess over it for a while, So make sure everything is about English in your life, at least for a few years. After that, then you can start, having more of a balance between English and your first language. All right, that's what I would say. Guys, that's it for this episode. I hope you found it useful. And this actually concludes this first series of episodes. I wanted to do these first three because I think that these first three topics are foundational to this podcast. Just to recap, the first episode was about my personal story, how I learned English myself, even though I've never traveled abroad or lived abroad. Okay. The second episode was about the CEFR levels, A1 all the way to C2. What do they mean? All right. And which level is right for you? And today's episode was about the proficiency tests in English. These are the tools, the resources that will help you determine your level on the CEFR currently and where you want to get to. All right. Now that we have covered these three foundational topics, now I can start bringing more lesson type of topics on the podcast. So, for example, some of you guys have already expressed interest in learning more about the future tenses. Stay tuned. I'm going to be talking about that pretty soon here on the channel. Grammar lessons, vocabulary lessons, you name it. Okay. So now we can actually start getting into English per se, like learning the language per se. But these three episodes, the first one, I wanted to do them first because I consider them foundational. All right. Guys, thank you so much. The best way for you to support the show, if you are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, is by leaving a 5-star review and following the show. And if you are on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, share the channel with friends and family who are also interested in learning English and becoming more advanced users and speakers of English, and leave a comment. I've been loving to read your comments here, guys. It's been great to see your comments, your interactions here. So share your thoughts or ideas. Of course, be respectful. Yeah, be nice, be kind. But yeah, do share your comments or thoughts and even suggestions of topics that you want me to cover in a future episode. Thank you so much. I'll be talking to you very soon, and I'm signing off. Bye-bye.